que sí.
Hola, soy Damaris, tengo 12 años y vivo en Guatemala. Les voy a hablar un poco acerca de mi país. Es un país donde convivimos personas de 24 grupos étnicos. El idioma oficial de Guatemala es el español. Algo muy lindo de Guatemala son los tejidos y los colores de los trajes indígenas, como los de mi huipil. En Guatemala tenemos muchos ríos, lagos, volcanes y algunos de los volcanes son activos como el volcán de Fuego. Algo que también ocurre en Guatemala es que hay mucha gente viviendo en pobreza. Esto significa que cuando ellos se enferman no tienen dinero para pagar sus medicinas y algunas veces se quedan sin comer. Esto obliga a que unos niños dejen de estudiar y poder ir a trabajar para tener dinero en casa. La pandemia de COVID-19 empeoró esta situación. Los niños no fuimos a la escuela por casi 2 años. Ahora estamos siguiendo solo unos días a la semana. Lo más bonito que hemos pasado es que ahora convivimos más con nuestra familia y siempre estamos juntos. Lo más triste es que ya no podemos ir a la escuela o al programa de compasión. Antes jugábamos con nuestros amigos y nos divertíamos mucho. Lo que más me gusta de estar en el programa es aprender de Jesús, compartir con mis compañeros, jugar fútbol y colorear. Lo que estoy agradecido con el programa Compasión es que a pesar de que la pandemia es grave, ellos no nos han dejado y gracias a los hermanos hemos salido adelante porque ellos nos llaman, nos saludan y nos preguntan cómo estamos. También estoy agradecida con los patrocinadores porque siempre piensan en nosotros y no nos han dejado solos, nos mandan todo lo necesario para estar bien. Quiero pedirles que oren por Guatemala, por los niños y sus familias para que Dios provea. Quiero orar por ustedes. Señor Jesús, te doy gracias por tu amor y tu misericordia. Te pido, Señor, por los patrocinadores, que tú los guardes y los guíes a donde quiera que estén. En el nombre de Jesús, amén.
Isn't that cool? Well, in 2020, if you've been around Crossroads, in 2020, we began to relook at Crossroads and really the vision that God had given us. And out of that process, we really discovered that our vision as a church, our desire was to serve people toward, connect people to Jesus by expanding God's kingdom, both locally here in the community that we're a part of, but also around the world by becoming a multi-ethnic, multi-generational church, making disciples of the next generation, our kids and our grandkids. Now, if you've been around Crossroads, you've heard that vision statement multiple times, and you know that that has been our focus for the last 5 years. Now, as we developed that statement, our amazing mission team, they asked a really great question, and that question is what does that look like for us who, are responsible for the global part of that? Like, what does that look like to make disciples of the next generation when we think about that globally? And that question, the answer to that question really began a partnership with Compassion International. If you're not familiar with Compassion, it is a Christian-based organization that is just bent on bringing kids out of poverty and preparing them to live out their story for God's glory. And so we decided to partner with Compassion and really to focus on the country of Guatemala, which if you're not familiar with Guatemala, just head to Central America, go past Mexico, and you'll eventually end up in Guatemala there. And we started kind of southeast of Guatemala City, in the southeast part of the country, in a place called Mazatenango. And there, Crossroads, listen to this, this is really cool. We sponsor 150 kids in that area. And in fact, we sponsored so many kids there, there's no kids left to sponsor in that area. And so it's super cool. And so about 2 years ago, Compassion came and said, hey, we have an opportunity for you. What would it look like to go about 100 miles northwest to a place called Coban, a little city there, and start a church and a compassion center there? Would you be interested in that? there's another 150 kids that would be available to sponsor that are living in poverty that we think Crossroads might be interested in helping. And we said, sign us up. And so in December of 2023, as part of our Christmas Eve offering, we raised $33,000 in order to start that church and that compassion center. And then last January, we had an opportunity to sponsor the kids from that center. And on that day in January, we sponsored 90 of the 150 kids. And so if you're doing math, this church sponsors about 250 compassion kids in Guatemala and a few others around the world in this ministry. It is amazing. It is awesome what God is doing through us. And so today, as we celebrate this partnership and what compassion is and who we are as a church in this, I actually want to introduce you to the man behind the curtain that we work with that kind of makes all of this happen for us. And his name is Rob Kelly. So would you give a warm welcome to Rob Kelly as he comes on out today? Rob Kelly and I have known each other for about a decade. We've been friends. He's a mentor of mine. And Rob at Compassion really kind of oversees a lot of church partnerships in the United States, Central and to the West. And he's the guy that helps us do the work that we're doing in Guatemala. And fun fact of Rob here is that just 5 years ago, he was Tiffany Dunn. If you know Tiffany Dunn, our community groups director, he was her youth pastor. That's how young they both are. Just 5 years ago, he was her youth pastor. A lot of connections here at Crossroads, but nobody speaks with more passion when it comes to this work than Rob. And so it's a great joy today. And I just want to ask you one more time just to warmly welcome Rob as he brings our message today. Thanks, Rob.
Hey, Crossroads, so good to be here. It's good. There are people waving at me and all that, so that's good. I've known a lot of people here for a long time at Crossroads, but as Matt described recently, my relationship here has been predominantly because of your partnership with Compassion International, and you guys are just killing it, doing some really amazing things. But it's kind of cool. There's one really special person who attends Crossroads here, and it's my almost 92-year-old mama who is here. Yeah, she's here. She's over there. She's right there. And it's kind of fun because she had no clue that I was going to be here today. So she's like, whoa, that's my son up there. So I'm sure the number one thing she's thinking is, don't mess up. Don't screw this up. But here's the thing. I mean, you're going to hear passion in me about how a moment can be transformative in a life, and sometimes in the life of a child. The earliest days of my life, I was an orphan. And that lady, along with the husband that she was married to, they made a really practical decision. I mean, certainly there was prayer and there was all this other stuff, but as she tells the story, it was just kind of this practical thing, like, we should adopt a kid. And they literally got a call one day and said, well, we have this little redheaded baby. Do you want him? And they're like, okay, we'll take him. And there's my story, right? But there was that moment in time where they just said, we're going to do something practical because we can do it. And it was a huge thing. It wasn't a little thing. And I'll be forever grateful. And it makes me, in part, really passionate about when there are kids in need, connecting them with people who could actually do something about their plight and possibly change that. And so you guys are doing that. You're a great church. I love the reputation you have in this community around the world, the impact, all of that. It's great. And I love Matt. He's a great pastor. I like to say he's an above average pastor. And that is my highest form of compliment that I can give somebody. And he dearly loves you guys. And he talks about me as a mentor. I'm sure I've learned more from him than he has learned from me. But I think that's just his term for saying this is a really old guy. So that's really it. But you guys are really like a Psalm 82 kind of church. Psalm 82 says, you're defending the weak and the fatherless and upholding the cause of the poor and the oppressed. And you guys are doing this locally and you're doing this globally. And it's such a powerful, powerful thing. And the numbers that you have, Matt alluded to them, the numbers, those are amazing. And I'm kind of this data guy. I like data. I like numbers. I like spreadsheets, all of that. That's really important to me. I've always joked that if my wife really wanted to do something special for me when I got home, I'd walk through the door and she'd be wearing an Excel spreadsheet, and that would be amazing, right? And so the numbers are vital to me. They tell a story. But of course, they only a number represents a story. And I have hundreds of stories that I could share. We obviously don't have time to do that here today. But one of my absolute favorite stories is that there was this sponsor child in the Dominican Republic, and he grows up as an adult, and he learns that his mother has this life-threatening brain tumor. And the surgery that saves her life is performed by this lady who is now kind of a world-renowned neurologist. She does brain surgery. But the surgery that saved this young boy, now man's life, performed by the skilled surgeon, who years earlier was also a sponsored child who grew up alongside the boy whose mother she saved. That's stunning, right? I mean, that doesn't even seem like that's real because it's so incredible, and yet it's very real. And so I go back to, man, there was a moment in time where somebody, either for great reasons or maybe not perfect reasons, decided to sponsor a little girl and decided to sponsor a little boy. And as time went on, their lives intersected, and there was this dramatic thing that happened because somebody at a church somewhere said, I'll sponsor a kid. It's like, Rob, it sounds like you're really wanting us to sponsor a kid. I do, unapologetically, right? I just do. I mean, there's 75 children that you guys have an opportunity to sponsor today. And I realized, I've looked in the Bible. I've tried so hard to find somewhere where it says everyone that loves Jesus should sponsor a child through compassion. I can't find that. But I really want it to be in there in a big way. And so you guys are doing great work. I extend on behalf of Compassion, the local churches that you guys have helped fund and supported, and mostly from the children and the families where you're serving them by sponsoring them. I just extend a huge thank you. It's such an incredible thing for them to know that there's someone far away that is supporting them, that's loving them, that's caring for them, and you guys are doing that in an amazing way. And so how do we max out a moment? I just want to talk about this a little bit. I think it applies to what we're trying to do today, but certainly beyond today. It's going to apply tomorrow and to people across the street as well as around the world. But how do you max out a moment? Well, I think that a moment gets maxed out when we practice what I'm going to call selflessishness. You guys say that word, selflessishness. 1, 2, 3, say it. Yeah, it's not a real word. Okay, one of my pastor friends made it up, and I just ripped it from him because I like it so much. Because if you break it down, it's this great word, and really it has this idea, right, that it's like, man, it's the act of getting what you really want by giving what you already have. It's practicing that. And I think the greatest life hack that exists in the world for all time is that if you want well-being in your life, however you're going to define that, if you want well-being in your life, the secret to getting it is helping others obtain it. Because if they get it, then somehow you end up with it as well. And so a little bit of audience participation. If you're online, you can do this as well. I want you to think through, just get our brains churning a little bit. Think about through how many tops, I don't know if that's the right word, blouses, shirts, hoodies, whatever, that you own. Just kind of think through man, how many do I own? And then kind of think through, I wonder how many I really need. And I know some of you dudes out there, you're like, man, you give me one white t-shirt and I'm good for 7 months, man, it's okay. Okay, hey, you can have more than that. You can have as much meat as you want. But what do you need? To work out, show up nice places, something comfortable, all that. But what do you think that you need versus what you have? And if you do that exercise when you get home, I think you'll be surprised at the surplus that you have. I did this a while back, and some of you are going to judge, but I went through, counted all my shirts, tops, workout gear, and all that. I had 82 things that I wear above the waist. And I was like, I have no idea that I had 82. I did a kind of thought through, so how many of these things do I really need? And so I took my lifestyle, the things I have to do, all of that, and I figured I need about 50, which means I had a surplus of about 32, which means I had to de-surplusify, see what I did there, about 32 of my shirts. It's like I didn't. But here's the thing that was a little bit haunting to me. I was like, man, I need 50. I think 50 is legit, and that's maybe generous. And here I have 82. That means I've spent resource, I've taken space, I've taken time. It's got my attention, all those things, to really devote that to 32 things that I don't really need. And I think it's easy to get caught in that spiral. I think it's really easy to get caught in that spiral. If you own 11 Phillips screwdrivers and you're at Home Depot and you see this one with kind of a fancy new handle that you don't own and it's only $19 and you're like, I'm gonna get that thing, right? Well, does that mean that 11 screwdrivers are not enough? And I know some of you guys are like, that's not even close to enough. I need many more than that. And that's fine. I get that. But here's the thing. It doesn't matter to me how many you have, but I want us to wrestle with this idea that what is enough then? What is enough? I mean, if you own 14 purses and you see a super cute purse that you know is just going to incredibly match the new pair of shoes that you have, it's going to be amazing, and you have that, does that mean that 14 purses are not enough? And ladies, I know you're like, Rob, it's fine to talk about tools and shirts. Don't be messing with my purse count, all right? I get it. But here's the thing. I don't care how many purses you have. You can come before me and say, Rob, you're not going to understand this, but I need to have 52 purses, one for each week of the year. I'm going to be like, that's awesome. I think it's great that you have 52 purses, but that just means you don't need 53. And so whatever time, energy, effort, resource could go to getting that 53rd purse, that could be diverted in a different way to maybe do some good with those kind of things. So again, I'm not advocating that there's this line, this quotient for everyone on all these categories, but I'm just saying, man, we need to wrestle with the question, well, what is enough? Because if we don't wrestle with that, I think what happens is that these magical moments that could happen that are geared toward eternity, man, we lose those. Those get compromised because we're worried so much about all of our stuff or having all of our stuff. The other day I was hanging out with my grandson, Jonah, and we were in line. We were going to get coffee, and we were in a car, and he goes, hey, Grandpa, can we pay for the car behind us? I'm like, oh, I love that. That's a great idea. Yes, we can pay for the car behind us. We get up there to pay for the car behind us. The person that's serving us is away for a little bit. He comes back. He says, listen, he goes, all 5 cars behind you, they all have prepaid orders. So there's really nothing for you to pay. And I was like, this is beautiful. I'm going to get full credit for wanting to do the right thing, and it does not cost me anything, right? But I love the generous spirit in my grandson Jonah, and I can tell you that he is a generous, but it's not always that way. I remember when he was a little kid, and man, he had dozens, probably over 100 Hot Wheels. And I remember when I'd go on compassion trips, I'd go to him and say, hey, buddy, could you give me 2 or 3 cars? And I'll take them, and I'll give them to a little boy or a little girl that maybe don't have toys, and then I'll take a picture, I'll tell them all about you, I'll learn their story, come back, show you the picture, I'll tell you about them, it'll be great, and then when we get done, I'll take you to the store and I'll buy you more cars. Could you give me 2 or 3 cars? You know how long it took that dude to try to figure out 2 or 3 cars to get? But we can all relate to that, right? Because we're like, man, I don't want to get rid of that, and I really need this and all that, and it kind of shows how susceptible we are to that. And we end up with all of this stuff, right? Workout DVDs that we don't really need or use, or exercise equipment that we dry our clothes on or hang our clothes from. All of that, a fondue set, anyone? And ultimately, it means that we can't park our cars in our garage. Did you know, read this a few years back, that over 75% of homes with garages, whatever number of cars that garage is supposed to be able to fit, that number of cars cannot fit into that garage because there's too much stuff in the garage. And out of that born this incredible industry that's called self-storage, right? And so what happened is now people pay money to store their stuff, and then they go visit it occasionally. You know what that is? That's crazy. That's absolutely crazy that we do that stuff. And I'm not trying to make anyone feel bad. I've had a storage unit in my life before. I get it. But man, our desire to always have more and more is a result of us never taking the time and saying, what is enough? And you'll never have enough until you say enough. And if we don't do that, we are at great risk of missing incredible opportunities to use our time, our resource, our efforts, all of that to really make the difference for something that matters for eternity. I think we underestimate maybe the dangers of prosperity. Prosperity is having more than enough. I mean, look at this slide. There it is, look at that. Look at the slide. No matter where we stand on the continuum between poverty and prosperity, the further we move away from enough, the greater risk we have, the more vulnerable we are. I think there's danger and disease that stem from both. For on the more than enough side, it's really getting caught in the trap of materialism. And the Apostle Paul addressed it. He said, yet true godliness with contentment is itself great wealth. After all, we brought nothing with us when we came into the world, and we can't take anything with us when we leave it. So if we have enough food and clothing, let us be content. But the people who long to be rich fall into the temptation and are trapped by many foolish and harmful desires that plunge them to ruin and destruction. For the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil, and some people craving money have wandered away from the truth and pierced themselves with many sorrows. Pastor Matt did a message on this actual text, I think 3 weeks ago, talking about contentment. Listen to it. It's better than I could have ever done. There's some great things in there. But I think the pull away from this is like contentment is something we learn. I mean, you just don't wake up in the morning and roll out of bed and it's like, whoo, am I content today? It's something you learn, and I think the way you learn it is basically twofold. It's one, by identifying what's enough and living around that reality. And then secondly, by being generous with who we are, with our time, with our resources, we learn contentment. So Paul continues on. He says, teach those who are rich in the world not to be proud and not to trust in their money, which is so unreliable. Their trust should be in God, who richly gives us all we need for our enjoyment. Tell them to use their money to do good. They should be rich in good works and generous to those in need, always being ready to share with others. By doing this, they will be storing up their treasures as a good foundation for the future so that they may experience true life. And I think those of us that know, those of you that have done this, when you're generous, when you're giving something away of yourself, of your stuff or whatever, and you're doing that, there's life in that that's not found anywhere else. That's certainly not found in our stuff. And so Paul is kind of talking us through how to live here. And really, I think when you break it all down, what Paul is saying is like, man, if you're rich, just be really good at it. Just be good at being rich. And some of you will not like hearing this, but the reality is, again, just statistically speaking, that if you took all the people that have ever walked on this planet, economically speaking, everyone in this room, everyone that's watching this online, we're all, no matter your current condition, you're all in the top 3% of the richest people that ever walked this face of the earth. That's just a reality, even though it doesn't feel like it at times. And so we are rich, and so Paul's saying, listen, you are rich, right? Be good at being rich. Be really good at that. And I think what makes that so hard is that we have these luxuries, but those luxuries become necessities. Man, when Carol Ann and I, my wife, we first got married, we had this little black and white TV, and he had these bunny ear things. Some of you young people are like, you have no idea what I'm talking about. That's okay. Look on, Google it. It'll be fine. That's what we had. But now we got like multiple TVs, and we got these platforms. We can watch pretty much any movie, and we can watch all my sporting events and all that. And I think some of you are similar. And if someone were to come in and take that from you, I mean, you're like, I'm going to pass out. Why? Because to you, to me, those things become as necessary as air. So I can't imagine not having that stuff. I mean, who here loves their coffee in the morning? Morning coffee, people? I need to have my cup of coffee, morning coffee. Some of you are afraid to admit that, but it's true, right? I'm there with you. But here's the deal. None of us were born drinking coffee. There was a time in your life that you didn't even drink coffee, right? But now you wake up and really you want coffee in the morning more than you want Jesus. If you're honest, probably, right? And in fact, if someone tries to take away your morning coffee, you're going to punch them in the throat. Why? Because that's not a luxury, Rob. That is not a luxury. That's a necessity. You don't want to see me without my morning coffee. And that happens with all of our stuff. And our stuff can become a trap, and we begin to work for it, and we begin to live for it, and we begin to find our identity in it, and all of those kinds of things. And sometimes we just need to stop and say, just a moment. Just a moment. Is this really how I want to live? Is this really what I want my life centered around? See, the further we move away from enough by having more than enough, we become super vulnerable to greed. And I think it's interesting. It isn't that often when Jesus kind of stops everything and says, look out, be on guard, be really, really, really careful, protect yourself. You know what he says that about? He says that about greed in Luke 12. And he says that because no one thinks they're greedy. I'm sure in beautiful, profound ways, Matt has had people from this church, from this community come up to him, and they've shared addictions and asked for help. They've confessed where they've been out of bounds, maybe in a relationship, some other things they've confessed to him. And they want help and they want prayer, and it's beautiful and it's awesome. And I'm sure Matt in this church handles those things really well. But I'm guessing, and I could be wrong, I'm guessing it's rare if ever someone has come up after a service, said, Matt, can I talk to you for a minute? He's like, yeah, what's up? Man, I just want you to know how greedy I am. I'm so greedy. Can you help me? We don't ever get to that point because we usually don't see ourselves as greedy. We see other people as greedy, but we usually don't see ourselves as greedy. And so we have to be on guard. We have to watch out. We have to make sure that we're identifying what's enough. We have to make sure we have channels and a rhythm of life where we're giving some of our life away so that we can always stay in a healthy place. So what about the less than enough side? That's the poverty side. Well, roughly about half the world lives in poverty, and that economically is typically defined by those individuals that live on less than $1.90 a day. And sometimes it's through poor choices, but usually it's because of where they were born, it's because of oppression, natural disasters, death of parents, all of those things. But it's more than that, right? I mean, poverty is hunger. It's lack of shelter. It's not being able to go to the doctor, not being able to work because there are no jobs. There's not an opportunity for education. It's not knowing how to read. It's having a child that dies from a preventable disease. Man, it's unclean water. It's powerlessness. It's lack of representation. Sometimes it's just a lack of freedom as we typically know it. And Jesus and the writers of the Bible, if you kind of unpack it, the way they describe the plight of the poor or poverty, it's really this way, that it's being without the things that the world values and as a result not being valued by the world. So that's what poverty is. It's where the world values all those things. You don't have them. Because you don't have them, we look down on you. And that goes on around the world. Poverty is increased vulnerability. All right, look at this slide. Here's a kid up here. Look at that guy, huh? Look at that little kid. This is one of the kids I sponsor in Bolivia. I saw this this is like 7-8 years ago now when I first took this picture. And he has a really hard to pronounce South American name. Kevin is my guy. And not overly athletic, in case you can't tell. I almost gave him back because he wasn't a very good athlete. I'm just kidding, some of you. I'm just kidding, all right? Love that guy. But he wore that little tiger hat. And he wore that hat, and most kids his age didn't wear those little hats, but little kids did. He got made fun of sometimes. But that was one of the last things that his mom gave him. About a month after I started sponsoring Kevin, his mom died in a car accident. And Dad was long gone, and it was now up to Grandma to raise him. And so his vulnerability went from extreme to even greater than extreme because there wasn't someone in his life that was providing for him, that was nurturing him, doing those things. But here's this amazing church where he goes to the compassion program, and people are stepping in and caring for him and loving him. And I'm doing what I can just to love on him and send letters and talk about life and all that stuff. And look at this guy now. He's a little boy. He's this young man. He's so cool, he doesn't even smile anymore. That's how you know he's arrived, right? He's like, hey, I'm too cool, I don't smile. But he's great. He's always struggled in school, like really struggled in school. But this guy right now is killing it in school, and he wants to be a police officer, and for some reason he really loves cars. So I send him pictures of cars, and I pretend like I know way more about cars than I really do. He thinks I know so much about cars, and I don't know anything about cars. But I love this dude, and he's this young man now, and I'm excited about what's in store for him for the rest of life. And so when we think about poverty, especially as it relates to a child, I want to encourage you to think in these terms. Luke 2:52 says that Jesus grew in wisdom and stature and favor with God and man. Man, when you have a child that lives in poverty, it's virtually impossible for them to grow in any of those areas, no matter what, unless there's outside intervention. And so that's where the local church, that's where a church like Crossroads, that's where an individual sponsor comes in to change that reality. It's where all those come together and holistic programming is deployed to make sure children like Kevin and millions of others are growing in each of these areas, following Jesus' ways and what Jesus taught. Such a powerful and profound thing. Psalm 127 Love how it describes children. It says, behold, children are heritage from the Lord, the fruit of the womb, a reward like arrows in the hand of a warrior are children of one's youth. Blessed is the man who fills his quiver with them. Listen, kids are a pain. Kids are adorable. Kids are awesome, and they're super awesome. I love kids. But here's the thing. They're like arrows. That means they're designed, they're created, they're built to soar. And so today you're going to go out there and maybe look at some child packets. And I picked up this packet right here. This is a dude in Guatemala. Guess what his name is? Kevin. Kevin. And Kevin is 13 years old, which means the likelihood of someone sponsoring him goes way down because he's older. And man, my heart is that Kevin gets sponsored today. And my heart is that when someone picks up this packet and looks at it, they don't look at it and say, oh, poor Kevin. But they look at it and say, man, just think what this kid can become. Just think what the young man years are going to be like for him. This guy was created to soar. He was created to leave the quiver and soar and fly and make the world quiver in all the right ways. And by the way, if you want to sponsor Kevin, come see me afterwards and I'll have him. But that's what I hope that you'll see, right? Are they vulnerable? Absolutely. Do I want you to see that vulnerability? Yes, but don't get stuck there. See about the potential that they could soar. And you know the very thing that they might need to make them soar is you. And some of you are already doing this and experiencing this. And so at the right moment, they have this, they leave what they're used to and they grow and they develop and it's beautiful. And I think one of the questions that most asked when it comes to areas of poverty is like, well, what can I do? Who can I trust? And I believe with all my heart that Crossroads would say, well, you can sponsor a child in Guatemala through compassion. And I love that because it makes global impact personal. It's already like there's 250 missionaries from Crossroads that are directly discipling children in Guatemala. And so today, maybe for the first time or maybe for the multiple times, second time, you can sponsor more than one kid. It's really okay. But man, if you're a parent, this is a great way to get your child involved and help protect them from some of the things that can come from having more than enough as they learn to give a little bit of what they have away to help a child in need. And I'll go back to where I started. All these sponsored children, the 250, there was a moment when they found out that there was someone far away in some place called Northgren or Thornton, Colorado, that they don't even know exactly where that is. There was a person that sponsored them and cared about them and chose to care about them. And there was a moment when they found that out, and for that child and their family, it potentially changed everything. And it very well may have looked something like this.
Baik, terima kasih. Fungsi papan data anak untuk mengetahui anak-anak yang terdaftar di PPA, berapa seluruhnya, berapa yang dapat sponsor, dan berapa yang belum punya sponsor.
Teman dapat sponsor, saya sakit hati karena tidak dapat sponsor.
Tiap kali dia kasih tahu sama saya bagaimana saya mama, anak-anak yang lain sudah atas sponsor saya belum dapat. Dan saya mama berdoa juga, tapi saya tidak pernah dapat mama. Tunggu anak, tidak mungkin. Nanti Tuhan yang atur. Saya bilang begitu sama dia.
3-4 bulan ke depan bahwa anak-anak ini akan memiliki sponsor melalui tangan-tangan Tuhan untuk menjamah hati para yang bisa peduli kepada anak. Tuhan akan memberikan yang terbaik buat keluarga ini. Ada sukacita, Asti, keluarganya Asti mendapat sponsor, dan ini surat dari sponsor yang buat Asti. Kita bisa bayangkan Bigyan ng sponsor.
Boleh Asti bukas.
Terima kasih banyak. Bawa anak saya baik. Saya kasih masuk PPA. Saya hari ini saya bangga sekali. Tapi Tuhan yang balas. Saya tidak mampu balas. Tapi Tuhan yang balas. Tidak pernah saya mimpi bahwa sponsornya Ati hari ini ada. Tapi saya bangga sekali. Sehingga saya jatuh air mata. Terima kasih banyak. Berlimpah-limpah.
Asti senang.
Senang.
Mereka, anak-anak itu merasa dekat dengan sponsornya, dan jadi ketika mereka menceritakan isi surat seperti itu, anak-anak merasa luar biasa bahwa itu tidak bisa dibayangin seperti itu.
Halo Helena Asti, namaku Rini dan aku senang menjadi sponsormu.
Mungkin pikirnya ya sekedar komunikasi saja, tetapi lebih daripada itu, kedekatannya lebih dekat sekali. Dan saya berterima kasih kepada Tuhan yang bisa memberikan sponsor kepada anak sebagai anak dan bapak, dan saya berterima kasih kepada Compassion sebagai jembatan yang dapat menghubungkan yang ada di seberang bisa menjadi satu. Itu kebanggaan saya dan saya merasa senang sekali.
So this is the second time I've seen that video, and my heart is just so filled with joy of a picture of the Great Commission in action. It's so beautiful. We are so grateful for our partnership with Compassion. We are so grateful that we get to see these stories of what God is doing around the world. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Angie. I'm part of our executive team, and I'm here this morning to just share with you what next steps could look like for you in Compassion. First, I just want to say, man, I really love Compassion. There's lots of reasons to support them. But for me, one of the things that really stands out is that they really come alongside a family, a child, in holistic development into adulthood. And so this approach isn't like, we're going to see you for a day or even a week or even a year. This approach is, we're going to invest and disciple, and we're going to be with you along the way into adulthood. And I just think that's so precious. When my husband and I, we selected our first Compassion child about 20 years ago. I don't know, guys, if you remember early on in your marriages, we were poor, like really poor. We, didn't have 2 nickels to rub together, but there was something that God was compelling in our spirit to give a little bit more. This whole series of generosity, that's what was really taking over our spirit. God was just convicting us to sacrifice. And so as Nick and I prayed over what a little bit more looked like in our very young post-college days, a brand new baby, we found Compassion. And as I was thinking about talking to you guys today, I was thinking about the things that Compassion inspired and sparked in our spirit. And I thought, you know what? Maybe we'll share with you, because they're the same things that spark in our spirit today. So first, it's really this idea of holistic discipleship for a child. When you give your $43, you can trust that Compassion's coming alongside in 3 really unique ways. First, in those just simple but profound physical needs. Compassion makes sure that these kids have good food and fresh water and access to simple medical care. Things that I find myself, I kind of get distracted from the blessing that we have. And so you can trust that Compassion comes alongside, and they're right there with those kids, making sure that they can physically thrive. But they go beyond that. They also come in education and in resourcing so that these kids can grow up and actually be sustaining, thriving adults. And guys, if that was not enough, Compassion's very center, very core of their mission is to go out and disciple all nations. So you can trust 100% that every compassion child has people around them that love Jesus and that have a spirit, a heart to share Jesus with these kids. And so that holistic approach really resonated for Nick and I as we were raising our two little people. The second thing that really stood out to me, you guys, a lot of you know that I live in the executive role here. So integrity in finances is really important to me. It's just a thing that God has put upon my heart. And I would say 20 years ago, I was a little spicier and probably even more convicted. So I wasn't as refined as I am now. So when Nick and I were just processing who we were going to serve and who we were going to donate to, compassion just rose to the top, because they are very intentionally transparent with how they spend money. And I was looking at their 2023 report. They haven't listed the 2024 yet. But in 2023, they reported that 81% of all proceeds given go directly to the children and sponsor centers. And so when you're thinking about where else to give, when God is convicting your spirit, you can trust that compassion is going to come alongside. They're going to share the gospel, and they're going to do it in a really way full of integrity. So we want to give you guys an opportunity to partner. But I want to pause and just preface a little bit and say, please do not feel any obligation. We do not want you to leave the building and feel pressure or duty. We really just want God to speak. And if God is speaking in your life and he is compelling you to serve compassion in this way, we want to make sure it's a really easy way for you to give. Okay? So first and foremost, if sponsoring a child is not part of what you want to do today, we completely understand. Would you commit to praying with us? Would you commit to praying with the new sponsors, with the new kids that are being sponsored, with our center in Guatemala? The second way you can get active is you can go out into the lobby. We have a party. So we have all kinds of fun treats and drinks to celebrate Guatemala and the center there. Then we have 70 kids that are part of our center that are looking for a sponsor. And so as you walk out the door, you'll see a wall full of all of these packets. Take a moment and read these packets. See what the kids, what the value is. What am I trying to say? There's things that they love, and you'll see that about them. You'll see when they were born and who they are. And so just go pray over these packets. When Nick and I chose our first children, we found a boy and a girl, because we have a boy and a girl, and we looked for the same birth dates as our boy and girl. That's one way to do it. We have some friends here who have 3 girls, and they chose a boy because they were like, we got enough girls in this house. So there's lots of different ways that you can select a compassion child. What you're gonna do is you're gonna pick up this card. You'll see there's a QR code on it. That QR code is gonna take you directly to the link for this child. What we do ask is that you don't take these packets, because if you take this packet and don't end up sponsoring this child, it'll take a really long time to get him back into the system. So we really just encourage you to do the process today. And if you need more time, you can scan the QR code, and like I said, that will take you directly to that child's page. Anybody in a compassion shirt will help you through that process. The third area we are doing new this year is, as Pastor Matt shared, you guys, this church is so generous. We funded and opened a compassion center in Guatemala. And that center is thriving, but it could always use more. And so maybe this is the first time you've ever given. We want to give you an opportunity to give $1 or whatever value you want to. And all of that funding, all of that donation will go directly to our compassion center. So that one's really easy too. You can go online or on our app. When you give, there's a drop-down box, and you'll see Compassion Fund. You can give a one-time donation to that fund, and we'll make sure it gets to our center. You are also free to drop a check in the black boxes in the back. Just put compassion in the subject line. So, friends, that's what we're inviting you into. Just pray, process, and let's celebrate what God is doing in compassion. Would you pray with me? Would you pray? Father, I am just so overwhelmed today by your generosity of spirit. I think about the commission to go out and to make disciples of all nations. And Father, you are just showing in such profound and beautiful ways what that looks like. And so, Father, I thank you for compassion. I thank you that they have a conviction to reach into all of the corners of the world and all the jungles and all the deserts, to reach kids with your saving story. And so, Father, we just thank you. We thank you for what you have built and what you are doing in Compassion International. We thank you for Rob and all of the talents and temperament that you have gifted to him, that he may just do your mighty and good work. And Father, I thank you for the heart conviction of our missions team and Pastor Matt to come alongside and join in partnership with Compassion. Father, you are in all of those spaces. And so we thank you. We praise you for the work that you are doing. And we ask you humbly to allow us to continue to do that mighty work. We love you and we praise you. And it's in your Son's name we pray. Amen.